This amazing place is Bulow Creek State Park. It's not too far from Ormond Beach. This is the Bulow Woods Trail. This stretches from the Fairchild Oak all the way to the ruins of a plantation. Not going to be able to make it the entire way today, but we're going to check out as much as we can. I'm here with my brother and sister-in-law. The Bulow Woods Trail stretches for 6.8 miles, mostly through an expanse of old-growth forest. This is not a loop trail, so to experience the entire distance, it will mean one of two things: hiking out and back, which would result in covering over 13.5 miles, or leaving a vehicle or arranging for pickup at the end of the trail opposite from which you begin. We started on the southern end and covered maybe a third of the trail's distance. It was a beautiful winter day, warm and sunny. I imagine that covering the same ground in the summer with heat and humidity and bugs and the occasional snake would not be nearly as pleasant. This is promoted as a chance to see the real Florida, as a way to see what the peninsula looked like when the sole inhabitants were members of the Seminole Indian tribe. I don't have a great deal of experience with hiking in Florida, but some sources I read say that this could be one of the most scenic hikes in the entire state. I can definitely believe that. I read that part of the trail was a plantation road connecting two plantations, and there also are some sections where it was a former Native American trail. I guess there's some animal trails in here too. Probably that was what the Native American trails were built upon. The majority of the Bulow Woods Trail lies within Bulow Creek State Park. That protects around 5,600 acres, much of which is very similar to this. On the trail, you'll walk amongst pine trees, palms, and live oaks. Before I get too far along, I want to mention our starting point. This is the Fairchild Oak. It is the largest in what is one of the most impressive groves of live oak trees in the American South. The Fairchild Oak reaches a height of over 70 feet. The circumference is in the neighborhood of 25 to 30 feet. Its canopy covers over 17,000 square feet, with the spread twice as wide as the tree is tall. It is an amazing attraction, and people stop by constantly to see the amazing oak and have their photo taken in front of it. This is considered one of the largest and oldest live oaks, not only in Florida, but in the Southeast. It's probably impossible to tell for certain how old a tree this is. I saw in one location that it's about 400 years old. I saw another source that said this tree is up to 600 years old. Either way, that's a pretty impressive number. Let's put it another way. Whether it is 400 years old or 600 or somewhere in between, this tree has lived far longer than the United States has been a country. Maybe it was around before Europeans even arrived in North America. It's staggering to think about. The Bulow Woods Trailhead is situated next to the Fairchild Oak parking lot. Traveling through the forest on the trail is a visual treat. It's something to imagine that at one time nearly all of the Florida peninsula was covered with vegetation and forest land like this. As you walk, don't forget to look up occasionally. Moving through as you watch the canopy slide past you creates a magnificent sensation. As you would guess, there is hardly any elevation change over this path. While generally good, the surface changes when it rains and for a period after that. Be aware that the trail can be muddy in spots. It hasn't rained for several days, but still you have spots like this. Just be aware of it. You can go around most places, and then the majority of the trail is dry. There were probably 4 or 5 small spots over the portion of the trail that we covered where it was necessary to step to the side to avoid the muck. I saw several cyclists when I visited, and they either blow right through or walk their bikes around the trouble spots. I have read that the southern portion of the trail is consistently wetter than the part that we did not walk. There is a great surface, some roots in the way, but nothing that you can't navigate, and those few muddy spots that I mentioned, haven't had one of those for quite a while. This is a really good hike. Coming from the southern trailhead, the route begins to look the same after a mile or so. Eventually, however, you emerge from the trees and come upon a place that looks like a savanna. After about a mile through the trees, the trail opens up into this area. A creek runs right through the middle. So absolutely beautiful. This reminds me a lot of the low country of South Carolina, where I lived for so long. It's absolutely amazing. At the middle of this grassland, there is a creek lazily flowing towards the ocean. As best I can tell, this is not the waterway that gives Bulow Creek State Park its name. Instead, this is Cedar Creek, which flows into the larger channel not that far away. The change in scenery is welcomed after the walk through the forest. The combination of grass and water and sky is hard to beat. A wooden boardwalk provides firm, dry footing approaching and crossing the creek. The hike out from the trailhead took about 45 minutes or so. You could probably make it a little bit quicker if you weren't shooting and stopping every once in a while. But this creek, where the trail crosses the creek, absolutely my favorite part of this early section of the trail. I lingered at the creek for a good 10 to 15 minutes, then continued to the north on the trail. I didn't cover too much more distance, though, before reaching the halfway point of the time we had allocated for the hike. We turned around and retraced our steps to the beginning of the trail near the Fairchild Oak. That being the case, our experience with Bulow Creek State Park and the trail was not yet complete. We drove to the plantation site to discover a little more before calling it a day. This is where the 6.8-mile path from the Fairchild Oak ends. When you get to the plantation ruins, you still walk a little bit. You can walk along the road and it's a quarter mile, or you can take this nature trail, which I've done. It's a little bit longer than a quarter mile, but it's much nicer than walking along a dirt road, I think. After that short walk through the woods, this is what awaits. This is the centerpiece of the Bulow Plantation Ruins Historic State Park. It is a sugar mill that was built in the early 1830s. The remnants of several buildings are still in place, with plenty of interpretive signs which explain what you are seeing. This is much more than anticipated. The ruins here are of an old sugar mill. The plantation here grew over 1,000 acres of sugar cane, and it was all milled right here. Amazing the amount of history that is in this fascinating place. Bulow Plantation is said to have been the largest plantation on the east coast of Florida. The production from 1,000 acres of sugarcane was apparently enough to warrant building this large complex. None of it, growing the sugarcane, building and operating the mill, would have been possible without enslaved people. I've seen that as many as 200 to 300 enslaved people were held on Bulow Plantation. Facts such as that should never be ignored when viewing the checkered history of the American South. It seems as though most of those who visit these ruins are struck by the enormity of what they are seeing.
I'm amazed by the size of this sugar mill and the fact that it took so many slaves to make it work.
This was huge. There were 12 sugar plantations along the east coast of Florida, and Bulow Plantation was the largest. The operation here came to an abrupt end in 1836.
It said it was destroyed by the Seminole Indians in the Second Seminole War.
When the war broke out, the plantation was abandoned. The Seminoles burned and destroyed all of the structures.
This mill was only in operation for about 5 years.
The various buildings of the sugar mill are the highlight of this park. There are a few stones in the location where slave cabins were situated. It's also possible to stand along the banks of Bulow Creek, a beautiful tributary of the Halifax River. There is a launch site from which it is possible to explore the creek via canoe or kayak. The question becomes, should you hike the Bulow Woods Trail? And I would have to say absolutely. The trail is gorgeous. Then you have the Fairchild Oak at the beginning and the plantation ruins at the end. It all makes for a very compelling package. Thanks so much for being with me here on Old, Alone, and Far From Home. I will see you next time.